Hi, it's Eric Martin. We're here today to explore this wonderful phenomenon where people come into a room, they agree to do something, and they all nod their heads, and then leave the room, and not a whole lot changes. I'm sure you've seen it as I have all over the place. The question here is when we're trying to lead change, adaptive change, whose work is it really? Oftentimes, the hope is that the person who initiated the change, the person who is most excited by it, is the person who will actually do the work. But as we know, people tend not to own what they don't create. So this question of whose work is it is critical to moving from planning to action. So what we want to think about when you pull people into a room is not just the case for change or the value proposition. That has to be solid. The challenge becomes that people often approach change as if it's just a sales job. If we just had the right data, if we just had the right logic, the right argument, that the rest of the change process would happen. And I'm sure you've seen, as have I, that often isn't the case. In fact, when you present data or change to people that contradicts their assumptions, their beliefs, their values, it often makes them more resistant than to begin with. So we want to begin with an assumption that making the case alone isn't sufficient, that what's required is to create a mobilization strategy with each other that takes into account the values, the loyalties, and the losses at risk for each of the folks around the table and the people that they're working on behalf of. So let's think a little bit about what do we mean by values, loyalties, and losses. Now, people espouse many values. People espouse very noble values. So I want you to watch how people behave. How do they spend their time and resources? These tend to be the things that they value. And the point here with adaptive work is that that value that they hold may be number 17 on the list. And most of the time, if it's not in the top 3 to 5, it's not going to get acted on. So we need to understand what are the other competing priorities or competing values that people would have to subsume in order to make the value of change higher on the agenda. It's adaptive work, but it's also what leads to more sustainable change down the road. The second thing to think about, other than values, are loyalties. Now, oftentimes when we explain a change to somebody and they resist us, we think that they don't get it. And so we explain it louder. The problem often isn't that they don't get it. It's that they get it perfectly and they just don't like it. They don't like it because it affects people that are important to them. People on their team, people in their organizations, people in their communities. So loyalties is the idea that when leading change, we need to think about the people that are impacted through the lens of the people around the table. Now, it's often an overlooked part of the change process. We think that if we can agree to something in the room, that one person can do all the work that's needed to shift values and shift relationships in their communities. It's really hard work, particularly if you've been in an organization for a long time. So how do we strategize around that piece of the work and not just focus on the case for change? The third idea, the third force that pulls people away from adaptive work are losses. Now, losses take many forms. Loss of autonomy, loss of relationship, loss of resource, power. Sometimes the biggest impediment to change is people don't want to give up the convenient life that they've developed, the routines, the processes that they developed in organizations. So even a loss of a sense of routine can prevent change. Another kind of loss is a loss of a sense of competence. We all want to feel competent in how we do our work. So rather than seeing these engagement processes that you may be a part of as an opportunity to vie for power, to hammer home a point of view, can we find a way to include those voices in our communities, in our organizations, and really understand what the adaptive work is for them and organize around that?